Good morning, everybody. It's Corinne at the Sewing Works. Thanks for joining me again today. Sorry I was not live two Wednesdays ago when I normally am. I was on vacation with my family and we had an amazing trip rafting down the Grand Canyon. I would highly recommend that trip to anybody who's looking for something to do. And I'd be interested to see what you guys have planned this summer. So please comment and let me know where you're going or what you've been doing to get out and do something fun now that things are opening up a little bit more. Maybe you're gonna go see family you haven't seen in a while, which was my case, or hang out with friends, or just travel to somewhere new. So we always love to share in each other's stories and adventures. So please do let us know where you're headed shortly this summer, hopefully. Anyway, back to sewing tips for today. We're gonna talk about how to do applique, sorry, just blanked for a minute, satin stitch applique with your sewing machine. Now, many of you have probably seen the lovely appliques we do with our embroidery machines, which have beautiful satin stitches or decorative stitches that perfectly meet the edge of our appliques. Now, there is a way that you can accomplish something very similar on your regular sewing machine, and all you need is a zigzag stitch. So, as I was searching the internet, as you all know that can be a big rabbit hole to go down, I was looking for new project ideas and I came across this sweater that was actually for sale, and I thought, oh, I really like the looks of that, but I want it in different colors. And so I thought, well, I could make that. So here we are. I think it was adorable because it was a quilt block that they had put onto, oops, dropping my tools. They put onto the sweatshirt, and I thought how perfect for the quilt shop to have a quilt block on your shirt. So I've already kind of prepped this and I've got it about 90% of the way done, but I want to show you some of the techniques that I used to create it. So for those of you who are not familiar with the product Heat and Bond, it is a terrific product for doing applique. It can be used for a lot of different things, but there is a paper side to it and then a glue side, which is more shiny and has ridges of glue on it. Good morning, Alicia. Looks like we got a couple viewers with us today. Sorry, it's hard for me to see when I'm far away from the phone whose little pictures are popping up. The other product that I use, which we'll talk about in a minute, is fusible woven, which is a woven stabilizer, so it acts like another fabric that just adds a little more body to what you already have. Since the shirt I wanted to put my quilt block on is a knit, I really needed to make sure I had good stabilization before I did any satin stitching, otherwise I was going to get a whole bunch of draw in and possibly a lot of dive down into the throat plate. Now, usually I recommend on a knit to go to like your single hole stitch plate so that you don't get that dive down. However, that won't work when you're trying to do a zigzag stitch, so we needed to be able to add that extra stabilization to help hold it up above the sewing plate. So what you do first is you need to figure out your design and figure out the size of it, which I can help you with if you're interested in. There's a lot of free designs out there that you can just trace off the internet. The big key is you need a mirror imaged version of that design. So you're actually going to draw a mirror image onto your Heat and Bond paper side so that when it is appliqued, it will be the other direction. So one way that I commonly do this is to trace it. If I just have the regular image, I'll trace it on paper and then I'll put it face down on a window or a light box, and I will trace it again onto the Heat and Bond using that mirrored image when it's reversed through that light process. So that's one of the key things that you need to remember. You need a mirrored image of what you want to produce. Now, some designs that doesn't really matter, but just wanted to make sure I added that in because that's a common thing people forget about. The other thing I like to do is put a little tag of which fabric I'm going to use with this piece so that when I get all my little pieces cut out, I can remember which one goes with what. Notice how I left extra Heat and Bond beyond the line of my applique shape when I traced it and cut it out. So you want to trace it onto the heat and bond, cut it out wider than the shape that you need, and then you're going to iron it onto the back side of your fabric. Okay? Then you're going to cut it out on the line so that you have glue all the way to the edges of your heat and bond. Okay, this might be review for a lot of you. All right, so now I've got my yellow fabric with the heat and bond on the back, and the paper is still on there. And sometimes you'll have like piece 1, piece 2, you know, you might have lots of yellow pieces that you need to keep track of. To put it onto your material, whether it's a quilt block or a shirt in this case, you're going to peel that paper backing. Oh, looks like I have a slit in mine. Hang on. You're going to peel that paper backing off. Don't know why I only got part of it that time. Sometimes this can be difficult depending on if you have fingernails or not. Okay, so I've peeled that off, and I don't know if you can see with that light shining in that the shiny glue is still on the back of this fabric. Good morning, Margie. So this will actually keep it from fraying, which is very helpful, and also help hold it in place before I stitch it. Very key. Then, I forgot to mention, the first time you iron it down, it's about a 3-second press with a medium to high iron. Then you're going to place it on your project, in this case my shirt, wherever I want it to be, with the paper backing off. And usually I'll lay all my shapes down at once so that I can make sure that they're all connecting in the middle where I want and in relation to each other the way I want. And then I'm gonna press with that medium to high iron for 4 seconds. So I do find that it takes a little bit longer on the press for the second adhering than it does the first. Now try not to over press. Depending on how hot your iron gets, you might get a little bit of ridges showing through from that glue onto the front side of your fabric. So always err on the less side of how long to hold your iron down before you accidentally get it too hot. So that's just a little pro tip. You can always come back and add a little more heat if you need it. Okay, so in this case, I've got all my shapes cut out and I've got them adhered down with my iron, and that means they're gonna just stay right in place so I can start sewing. So now I wanna show you what I'm gonna do at the sewing machine to get this beautiful satin stitch. So bear with me. The cameraman's gonna make you a little sick. You might have to close your eyes for a second while I move you to my sewing area. And I think there's a way, here we go, to flip you around. I'll fix that crooked part in a minute. Okay. Oh, you guys are kind of dipping back into the no man's land. Like I said, sorry about making you sick. There, I want you to be able to see my settings here. Sorry, pause the feed for a second. Okay, so I think you can see this, maybe not quite. I've just turned my sewing machine on, so I haven't changed anything just yet, but we're gonna select a zigzag stitch. Now, my zigzag comes up with a default of 3.6 and 1.5 is the length. The width was the 3.6. I, for this project, decided to leave the width alone, although depending on how wide you want your satin stitch, you can always adjust that. The big key here is stitch length. So I'm going to dial that down. I know that when I'm using isocord thread, which I love to use because of its beautiful sheen, I need to go down to about a 0.2 to get that nice tight satin fill. And on my machine, it visually shows me what that's going to look like. Depending on which machine you're using, that may or may not be visual for you. Now, I also want to use a 10C foot, or 10D foot if I have it available. So I've told my machine that I have that foot on. If this project is going to take more than a day, you may want to save this stitch to your favorites folder so that you don't have to remember your settings for later. So again, that would be the heart. Put something in your folder and I can save it as a satin stitch. Okay, that's just in case I don't finish. Now I'm going to angle you down more towards the sewing bed and show you how this works. I love this particular applique design because it's all straight lines, which is much easier to do free motion satin in straight lines than it is on curves. Now, very important that I keep my shirt opened up so that I only stitch through that single layer on the front of it. So you might have to do a little bit of stretching and pulling to get that to lay where you want. Now, before I start stitching for you, I want to tell you a little bit what I had to do after I adhered this down. I did go ahead and cut the piece of fusible woven large enough to fit behind my block so that it can stabilize those stitches that I'm about to add to this block. I also, after I stabilized it, I sewed these inner section lines across. I think you can see that. So an X pattern and up and down. Now the first couple times I only sewed up to the middle and then I jumped over and sewed across the other side because I didn't want to create a whole bunch of bulk here in the middle. After I got the center part completed, I began my journey around the outside edge. And I have sewn all the way around the left side, up across the top and down the right side. And now I'm going to show you how to finish this off with the bottom. Okay, just make sure my tail's long enough. So I use the 10 foot because it's got this lovely flange that I can line up right, and I know you're not right in front of my needle, so it's a little hard to see, line right up on the edge of that fabric. And it's going to seem like this will take a little while because of the amount of stitches we're laying down, but bear with me here. We don't have very far to go. Okay, so we're going to start stitching. Make sure we are indeed moving and not just building up. We might have to go. I think we were starting to get hung up on that last seam. There we go. Now we're cruising. That was a little bit of a knob there. I might have to take some of those stitches out. We'll see. Okay. And we're going to sew on down to the end. And then I'm going to pivot. Now, oftentimes I pivot with my needle on the outside, but I was getting awful close to the edge. So I'm going to pivot with it on the inside point. Then I'm going to go needle up and just scoop myself right where I want to be to start that next corner. And we're ready to just sew down that other side. Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's really going or not. There we go. Now I probably should have cut my stabilizer behind a little bit bigger because I am like right up to the edge of it, and that's part of the problem I'm having at my points. Now I'm just giving it a little guidance. I don't want to push too hard because I'll end up with thicks and thins in my satin stitch. So I'm letting the machine kind of do the work. So I stopped on the outside swing of this corner, and then I can line up to come down the next side. You can see how that heat and bond is just holding that in place for me. Stopped on the outside swing, but I think I'm going to have to do a little adjustment here. Yeah. Let me scoot over just a tad. Okay, here we go. Make sure my shirt is nice and flat. Make sure we're feeding. Oh, yeah, that was a ball on that corner. I'm going to have to finish that off. Boo! Yeah, okay. Let's just fix it right now so you guys can see. I have errors. I have oopsies all the time on these videos. Okay, so what happened was my fabric got a little hung up here in the corner. So when I finally pulled it free, you can see my satin stitch kind of jumped. Well, satin stitching is very easy to rip out. You just slide your little seam ripper under that, and you can rip it from the back if you like. I typically am careful enough, I feel confident to go from the front. So all that thick thread built up and didn't let my foot keep moving. You just gotta be careful you don't slice into your garment. Okay. Take that little ball out. Let me get to it over here a little bit. Nothing like making it look super easy, huh? Good morning, sister. Thanks for joining us today. I got to have a wonderful time with your children on our trip. And you, of course. But your kids grow up so fast when I'm not around. You all know how that goes. Okay. Get that ripped out. All right, perfect. Now, come right back in and we're going to just fill that gap. So we can line up right where we need to. And I'm probably going to cut and skip some of that because I've already stitched it. And then come up to where I finished last. And I know it's hard to see what I'm looking at exactly through the lens of the camera, but I'll show you here in a second. Okay, so this is the one I goofed on. I have a few more threads to pull out, but we'll get it fixed up and pretty like the rest of it. So there you have it, a nice satin stitch that was done free motion. I didn't need an embroidery machine, and you can create all your own designs. So anyway, thank you for joining me again today. I'm gonna flip you around. And I wanna let you know that in 2 weeks from today, we'll have another video that will not be live because I won't be in the office at the end of the month. I'm gonna be on a trail ride with my mama. So anyway, let me know where you're headed this summer, and don't forget that the summer sale is starting today. So if you need a new set of luggage for your sewing machine, or if you're interested in a new sewing machine, we have great deals on Burnett's and Bernina machines. So let us help you find the machine of your dreams. Thanks. See you guys later.